lot. Performance factor this year. They got a good shot to win the D6 title.
Something tells me we may be hearing those other teams here coming up in a moment. Let's check it. Who clocks in at number 9 in the small school division rankings? It is the Northwestern Tigers checking in at number 9. So Mondovi at 10, Northwestern at 9. How about number 8? The Darlington Redbirds, the Division 6 runner-up from a year ago, a perennial powerhouse in southwestern Wisconsin. Dennis Semrau, the Darlington Redbirds. No surprise to see them on this preseason list.
Yeah, the Redbirds, they have 7 silver balls since their last title in 1995. So I think they want that gold ball. Because of 3 straight trips to state, they're up in Division 5 this year. So we'll see what happens with the move up.
Moving on up to number 7 in our small school rankings reveal, it is the St. Mary Springs Ledgers, a perennial power in the state of Wisconsin. Todd Sommerfeld, you've overseen polls for a long time. This is no surprise to see St. Mary Springs in the top 10.
No, and I think kind of what we're starting to get into, and we will see, because it's the first poll of the year, is you're going to see a lot of those blue blood programs. St. Mary Springs is obviously one of them. Bob Hyland's been doing this for decades and always had teams that were going to be able to compete at the top of the state. People have come to expect that. So I don't think it's any surprise to see Springs in this poll at all.
Let's see if that trend continues, seeing teams that we recognize the names of that are consistent state title contenders. Let's see who's number 6 in our small school media poll. It is Appleton Xavier. The Hawks check in at number 6 in the small school rankings reveal. Let's move on to that left column, which is where you want to be if you're one of these schools in Divisions 4 through 7. This is our top 5 for the small schools. Let's see who's number 5. Reigning Division 7 state champion, the Edgar Wildcats. They won the Division 7 state championship last year, defeating Blackhawk Warren by a score of 36-6 at Camp Randall Stadium. Edgar checks in at number 5 in the small school rankings.
Jerry Sins has won titles in 5 different decades. Yeah, he's been doing it longer than Todd and I have. So 70s, 90s, 2000s, 2010s, and 2020s. 13 straight wins to close out the year and had 9 shutouts in a row at one point. This is the one when I worked for the State Journal. Hey, somebody scored on Edgar this week. Nope, all right, the streak continues. That's the kind of program they have.
And you saw it with how good the defense was last year as well. Edgar checks in at number 5 in the small school rankings. Who's number 4? If we saw the Division 7 state champion at number 5, we see the Division 5 runner-up from a year ago, the Wrightstown Tigers, checking in at number 4 in this year's poll. Wrightstown did fall to La Crosse Aquinas by a score of 32-13 in the Division 5 state championship game at Camp Randall last year. Wrightstown checks in at number 4 in this opening poll. Moving on up to number 3. It's actually a tie. Surprise! The first tie for our vote for the small school media poll here on the ESPN Wisconsin Rankings Reveal Show. Both the Stratford Tigers and the Lodi Blue Devils, 2 reigning state champions, tied for number 2 in the poll. Stratford, the reigning Division 6 state champions, defeating Darlington at Camp Randall Stadium. Low-scoring 10-7 game a year ago with a field goal at the final second. One of the thrilling finishes we saw last season. And the Lodi Blue Devils, who defeated Luxembourg Casco to win the Division 4 state title as head coach Dave Pulls rode off into retirement. Lodi and Stratford tied for 2 in the small school media poll. Dennis?
This is a respect factor. Lodi graduated every starter they had last year, but the conference coaches picked them to win the Capital, and around the state we think that they're going to be back there just because champions don't rebuild, they reload.
So we've now seen the Division 7 champion in Edgar clock in at number 5, Lodi, the reigning Division 4 champion, and Stratford, the reigning Division 6 champion, tied for number 2, which means the Division 5 champ from last season is your number 1 team in the small school division entering this season, the Aquinas Blue Golds. And for more on the Blue Golds, let's talk to Todd Sommerfeld of the La Crosse Tribune. Todd, this is one of the winningest programs in the state. Consistently, we see them at Camp Randall Stadium. You cover them closely up in La Crosse. What can you tell us about the Blue Golds as the number 1 team in the small school media poll to begin this season?
It's kind of weird to keep going back to this, but they're not terribly far removed from having to forfeit games and not having enough players to play. It's not that too far in their past, and now they put together 3 state championships. I think people could see, the first one, maybe the second one coming. Last year, I think surprised some people. They had a lot of changes they had to make. They had to put in a new quarterback, but they were able to make the changes they needed to make and continue that run. They started with a loss to Prairie du Chien. I think that caught some people by surprise. Prairie du Chien ended up being a good team. They have a fantastic player in Blake Thierry there who's going to go play at Indiana, and is always a tough team to beat, regardless of its record. There's a rivalry there. They play each other a lot at the beginning of the season, but they recovered and came right back. Kyle White is a fantastic running back. They had a very good offensive line. They're going to have some holes to fill there. Shane Willenbring is maybe one of the best linemen I've seen. He was a starting left tackle as a freshman for them and went 4 years there. So they're going to have to find something there. Jacob Thornton's back at quarterback, so they have that. They're going to have a real playmaker with Logan Becker as someone they try to get the ball in his hands, maybe out in the flat or out down the field a little bit. There's still going to be a tough out this year. I think it's a lot like last year where people are going to be saying, well, they can't do it again. You never know. I mean, the Tom Lee has his team really focused on being elite, I guess. Like we can put it that way. When you're at Aquinas, first day of summer workouts, you have 100 people there. Not all football, but I mean, it's a school that's very committed to what they're doing athletically in recent years. So it's tough to deny the fact that they could go out and do it again.
I love what you said about people saying they can't possibly do it again. And, of course, we see them right back there again in the mix this year as the number 1 team in the small school division of our ESPN Wisconsin Media Poll. Because, Dennis, we hear that about a lot of teams in the small schools. What stands out to you from our top 10 list here of these small school divisions in our inaugural ESPN Wisconsin Media Poll rankings?
I think Todd touched on it earlier. Blue Bloods, Aquinas, Edgar, Stratford, Xavier, Springs, Darlington, all these programs have done a lot. So there's a lot of respect for them. You mentioned the Blue Golds. 309 students, I think, was the number I saw they have. I went to a small high school and know what it was like. Everybody's out, you're trying to get every guy walking the hallway out for a sport, and they do a phenomenal job. It's sort of like Wanakee. Oh, yeah, Wanakee, they always win. They've said that about Sun Prairie in our area, and they say that, of course, about Aquinas across the board. I mean, Todd, how many state tournaments have you covered for Aquinas? Pretty much every one, right? All of them.
Yeah. Girls basketball, boys basketball. They go, and even boys tennis, all the football, track. They've had some real standouts and won there, cross country, everything over the years.
Our 20-plus voters from around the state do remain anonymous throughout this process, but Hunter Vaughn, our producer of the ESPN Wisconsin Media Poll Rankings Reveal show, is the one who accumulates the data. Hunter, you want to do your best Steve Kornacki impression for us and give us a little breakdown of how you saw some of the voting shake out behind the scenes?
I should have gotten a long sleeve shirt and had rolled them up for this.
Yeah, you already got the short sleeves in place with the button up, so that's good.
But the big thing was that tie at number 2 with 91 votes between Stratford and Lodi. That one was really interesting to me, and like Dennis said, I think that was a respect factor of what the program is in Lodi. But then even the schools that didn't get into the top 10, Regis sat at 20 points. Mondove, they were at 27. So just a couple of polls didn't have Regis in. That is what was enough to keep them out of the top 10. And that's going to be a theme that I think we're going to see into the large school as well, of just a couple of polls not having somebody in, and suddenly you miss out on being a top 10 team.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see how this evolves throughout the course of the year. Thanks for the insight there, Hunter. Dennis, final thoughts on the small school?
You had 5 teams get at least one first-place vote. So early in the season, that's it. We'll see as season goes on if it kind of and Todd, the AP poll, toward the end of the year, you always had, okay, if you had 8 voters, 7 might vote, or 8 might vote for that first-place team every week. If they don't lose, they're going to kind of stay up there. Aquinas, last year they did lose that one to Prairie du Chien, which, as he pointed out, it's a very good program. So I'd be curious to see how long our teams stay unbeaten and if this top 10 in both stay consistent for a few weeks.
Todd, your final thoughts on the small school rankings here for the preseason of our media poll.
The one thing I'll throw out there is to look not too far into the future, because you're going to have that Stratford-Edgar game coming up, and we'll be able to kind of maybe separate the two of those. I think that's week 2, so by the end of the month, we're going to know who's the better out of those two teams, and that's always a good game.
Number 2 and number 5 meeting. Can't wait to see how that shakes out. The ESPN Wisconsin Media Poll Rankings Reveal Show on the ESPN Madison, ESPN Milwaukee, and ESPN Beaver Dam YouTube channels. Jesse Nelson, the Dean Dennis Semrau covering Madison area high school sports, and Todd Sommerfeld of the Lacrosse Tribune joining you for this maiden voyage as we unveil now the large school rankings. Top 10 for the preseason rankings of our first time ever doing the ESPN Wisconsin Media Poll. A lot of teams, divisions 1 through 3 roughly, are the ones who are represented here in the large school media poll. Enrollment 551 and up. Let's begin at number 10. And you know how competitive these rankings are going to be. If Catholic Memorial, the Crusaders, check in at number 10 in the large school media poll. Dennis Semrau, you hear him on 94.5 ESPN Milwaukee. You're home for Catholic Memorial Crusader football. The Crusaders, always a juggernaut. They check in at number 10.
Yeah, they lost their first 2 games last year. One of them was to Marquette, the state champion. But that's a team that over the years, they should be in Division I. I know back in the days when you had the old Whistler, the old private school, whenever Fond du Lac Springs won their conference, they were automatically in the large school division. And there's a lot of people that figure that. So it's only fitting that they're in the large schools here. And coming in, they've always been competitive. So we have them on our schedule, I believe, this year.
Catholic Memorial and Franklin square off in week 1, Friday night, 7 o'clock on ESPN Milwaukee. And then on ESPN Milwaukee and ESPN Beaver Dam in week 2, Catholic Memorial visits Sun Prairie West. You'll be able to watch that game on the ESPN Madison and ESPN Milwaukee YouTube channels. All right, moving on to number 9 in the large school rankings. Number 9, Green Bay Notre Dame, the Tritons, another consistent team that we see making deep runs in the postseason. Another one last year. Notre Dame checks in at number 9 in these rankings. Keep it moving to number 8. And Dennis, you like to call them the University of Wisconsin Arrowhead. The Warhawks check in at number 8 in our rankings. When you see Arrowhead, Todd Sommerfeld here in at number 8, that's our first team from the Classic 8 conference that we see represented, which is often one of the juggernauts in the state of Wisconsin.
I just think, what can't Arrowhead do? Dennis isn't wrong with his reference to the program. They're good at everything. They have great facilities over there, of course, which certainly helps. But what a great group. Look at any sport of the coaches that they have over there. The football program has obviously flourished and been very good for a long time. I'll go back to number 9 for a second. And if you're Notre Dame, of course, that's a team that you're going to look at when you're in this poll. If you had a quarterback who had 40 touchdown passes last year, like Christian Collins, there's some other stars on that team as well. So both of these teams in this top 10 is much of a surprise here.
Arrowhead, as good as they have always been, has not been back to the state championship game since Kimberly dethroned them in 2015.
We covered their game with Mount Horeb Barneveld last year, unbeaten Mount Horeb Barneveld.
That's Green Bay Notre Dame, yeah.
Right down to the last second that game went. And you talk about James Flanagan. His dad played for Notre Dame. He's going to be playing for the University of Notre Dame next year. So they got some studs on that team.
From one to the other. Let's check in at number 7 in our large school media poll, and it's Lake Geneva Badger, the Badger Badgers, who are the reigning Division II WIAA state football champions. Dennis, you were on the call of the game last year at Camp Randall when Badger defeated Waunakee to win that Division II title. Waunakee always plays thrillers at Camp Randall, it seems, and Badger got the best of them last year as the reigning Division II champs.
Yeah, unfortunately, that was Pat Rice's last game, long career. He finished with the highest winning percentage in state history. But Badger rushed for 451 yards. They never punted. And people say, well, why do Waunakee go for 2? Why didn't they go overtime? Because they couldn't stop them, and they knew it. And unfortunately, Badger had one more play than the Warriors did last year. But Coach Hensler went through so much last year with health issues and with his mother and who had passed away on November 1st, and he's ill, and he somehow made it there. And I guess the emotion of that game was something else. Now, one of those guys, Matthew O'Grady, who rushed for 100 yards, he's going to switch to quarterback this year. And the way they run that triple option, they're not going to miss a beat. That is a team that nobody wants to play.
Checking in at number 6 in the large school media poll, the Kimberly Papermakers. Here's another traditional power. Todd Sommerfeld, they won the title in 2022, and you know that Kimberly's going to be on a mission to try and get back to Camp Randall this year.
Yeah, we're keeping with our blue blood theme here with Kimberly. Always a team that you have to keep an eye on. I used to work over in Oshkosh, the early 2000s, and that was before Kimberly became a power. But I remember kind of as I was leaving there to come over to La Crosse, a lot of the Oshkosh North coaches in various sports were kind of making the move over to Kimberly, baseball, football, strength coach, that kind of thing. So I kind of saw that transfer go there, and almost immediately it started turning into winning for the entire program. Obviously, the football has kind of led the way in terms of being in so many state championship games and winning the titles. But, a power team and a power conference over there for sure.
All right, we move over to the left side, which is always where you want to be in the top 5 of our ESPN Wisconsin Media Poll. Here we go. Number 5 in the large schools, the Mukwonago Indians, a team that I always found to be a rival, being an alum of Muskego High School. So I don't have many nice things to say about Mukwonago. Those who listen to Wilde and Tausch every day know that about me. But I will say this, Dennis, they are a traditional good football team in the Classic 8, the second team from the Classic 8 represented here in this poll. And again, they were in that state championship game in 2022, falling to our number 6 ranked team in Kimberly. Mukwonago on a mission to try and get back to Camp Randall and get the job done this year.
Yeah, they were just 6-4 last year. They lost to Arrowhead in the playoff opener, but they returned 7 starters on offense, 8 on defense, 44 letter winners. So it might be a case of, okay, guys, they had to take a step back. But the bar is so high, like a lot of the Blue World programs, they'll be back, I think, there.
Checking in at number 4 in the large school media poll. There they are, the Waunakee Warriors. Last year, Division II runners-up, falling to Badger at Camp Randall Stadium. New coach this year, but Dennis Semrau, you know that Waunakee is always probably the most consistent winningest team in the Madison area. Easy for me to say.
I covered the program for 3 decades, and Coach Graverson took over. Almost all the coaches are back from that staff. They had, I think, 3 that went for the head coaching job. They all agreed, though, they were going to come back. Pat Rice is kind of taking a step back. I mean, he's there to help out, but he doesn't want to overshadow the program. But Vance Johnson, who's an all-state quarterback potential, is back. I remember covering his dad in high school. That's how far back I go with that program. Caden McKenzie, a great wide receiver. They have pretty much an all-star at each level in defense. So Waunakee is Waunakee. They're going to rule again, I think, in the Badger Large. But now they are definitely Division I because of the performance factor. We don't wonder because of enrollment where they're going to be. And 2 years ago, they played Kimberly and lost in Level 3. So, Coach Graverson said, bring it on. We're a Division I team, and we welcome that.
About time that they get in there full time. So here we go. The top 3. You may be noticing that we're missing some big powerhouses from the Milwaukee area. Let's unveil our top 3. Checking in at number 3, the Franklin Sabres. I mentioned a huge game for Franklin in Week 1, hosting Catholic Memorial, 7 o'clock Friday night this week on the ESPN Milwaukee YouTube channel and on 94.5 ESPN Milwaukee if you're in the area listening. So Franklin checks in at number 3, which means you have the reigning Division I champion Marquette and the Muskego Warriors still waiting to see who's number 2 and who's number 1 in these rankings. Let's find out. Hunter Vaughn, who's number 2? It's Muskego, the Warriors, number 2 in our large school media poll, which does mean at number 1, we find the reigning Division I state champion Marquette University High School Hilltoppers. Marquette winning that state championship game last year over Franklin 27-10 at Camp Randall Stadium. 3 of our 10 teams from the Classic 8 in our large school media poll. Marquette is your number 1 team, followed by Muskego, Franklin, Waunakee, Mukwonago. That's your top 5. Kimberly, Badger, Arrowhead, Notre Dame, Catholic Memorial rounds out the top 10. We go to Todd Sommerfeld of the Lacrosse Tribune. Todd, your thoughts on the large school media poll here with Marquette leading the way at number 1.
Well, I have to start by announcing my first screw up because I was going along and looking, and I wanted to look up Franklin quick, and I saw that their quarterback Joseph Kelly had 22 touchdown passes last year, 2,500 yards. I think I mentioned before with Notre Dame, Collins being quarterback. He's a running back.
He's a running back, right?
So I screwed that up. But again, the top 3 again are teams that we've seen up here all the time. We know how good Marquette is. We know the quality competition that it finds to play. Muskego, year in, year out, is up there. Franklin's kind of been the same. So when I look at these 10 teams here, I mean, it's pretty incredible. I know we're condensing 7 divisions into 2, but man, that's a tough list of 10 teams to crack.
It sure is. Muskego, 2-time, would have been 3 times defending state champions, if you ask me, because they won it in 18 and 19. And I think they would have won it in 22 if we would have played any championships that year. But, of course, no championships played due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Dennis Semrau, your overall thoughts on our large school media poll in our top 10, how it shook out this week.
Does Muskego have another Hunter Wohler?
It seems like they're always cooking up somebody that's going to go on and be a great talent at the next level, so I wouldn't put it past them.
Yeah, getting to see him play as a sophomore in the state championship games, oh my God, now he's a Badger toward the end of his career. Yeah, Marquette, they went on to win the basketball state championship too. It's an all-boys school. That was a rival in high school because I went to private school, so they are always good. They have 20 letter winners and 10 starters back. Tommy Novotny is expected to leap into the conversation as one of the best players in the state, one of 6 returning starters on offense. They have the all-state kicker, Eric Schmidt, who's a Wisconsin commit. You want to watch this guy. He's one of the top in the country. So they've got it all, and that's why they're number 1. And like you say, when you win a state championship, you're number 1 until somebody knocks you off. And any one of those teams, again, Marquette was one of 4 teams to get votes, first-place votes. One other one did make it, and that's Sussex Hamilton. So you got some other teams. Sun Prairie East is just under the top 10. That is a great, like Todd said. I'm like, wow, I want to see these teams play. And now because of live streaming, you can almost see on Friday night, go to a game and then spend all day Saturday. If you're not watching a Badger game, you can watch a high school game.
You can find them anywhere, including on the ESPN Madison, ESPN Milwaukee, and Daily Dodge TV YouTube channels for our respective ESPN Wisconsin stations. Let's go to our Steve Kornacki. Hunter Vaughn accumulates the data. He's our producer of the show. Hunter, what stood out to you in accumulating the large school media poll here for the preseason?
Well, Dennis got into it a little bit there. Sussex Hamilton receiving a first-place vote, but they got 22 points combined. Catholic Memorial had 25. Sussex Hamilton only appeared in 4 polls of our voters. Meanwhile, Catholic Memorial was in 7 of them. So combined, they were able to get enough points to get them into that top 10. And that's what's going to be really great about this. With the breakdown that we have of voters from across the state, you're going to see schools that, yeah, you might have a couple of people that put them up high from maybe that Milwaukee area who see Sussex Hamilton. But if there's a bunch of voters who know what Catholic Memorial is from that Eau Claire area or the western part of the state, that's not going to be enough to get you into this top 10.
Interesting data there, Hunter. Thank you. Todd Sommerfeld, your final thoughts on our large school media poll and our inaugural edition of our ESPN Wisconsin Media Poll rankings reveal here on this Tuesday afternoon.
I think it's been a lot of fun to see what we can put together as an entire state. As we've said multiple times, we have voters coming from all over the state, whereas in recent years, I think we've kind of hit a little lull, and it's been whoever has time to vote or wants to vote just jumps in and does it. This time we made a point to try and get every part of the state involved so we can get teams involved from all different parts, and it's nice to see something like that shake down because that's kind of what our poll used to be years ago.
We thank the voters. We thank you, the fans, for joining us here on our maiden voyage of the ESPN Wisconsin Media Poll Rankings Reveal Show. This will take place every Tuesday afternoon at 12:30, streaming right here on the ESPN Madison, ESPN Milwaukee, and ESPN Beaver Dam YouTube channels. You can find the information available on the ESPN Wisconsin social media platforms, available momentarily once we get them posted at the conclusion of this show. Dennis, your final thoughts on our first polls being unveiled here today.
Well, I put together a list of like 11 or 12 teams that weren't mentioned that could be in here, and locally Verona is one of them, with Trey Poteet, who's going to be going to play at Tennessee next year. But I take it if you lose, it's going to be tough to stay in the poll because there's so many good teams. And number one, Marquette and Aquinas, two Blue Bloods. We'll see what happens here over the next 9 weeks.
The traditional powers, as Todd Sommerfeld has said repeatedly on this show, definitely at the forefront of our preseason media polls. We'll see some great non-conference games here early in the schedule. We'll see what that impact will be on the poll next week at 12:30. This has been the ESPN Wisconsin Media Poll Rankings Reveal Show. For Hunter Vaughn, Todd Sommerfeld, Dennis Semrau, my name's Jesse Nelson. Enjoy high school football Thursday and Friday this week all around the state. This has been the ESPN Wisconsin Media Poll Reveal Show on the ESPN Wisconsin YouTube channels.